Welcome to the Fantasy Throwdown Podcast, bringing you the latest updates from the world of sports, gambling, and pop culture. Because you can't have a show without hot takes or a Tiger King meme these days. Know what I'm saying? Now, with over 200 episodes and ready to get after it again, here's your host, Dwayne Callender.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Throwdown Podcast. I'm your host, Dwayne Callender. Got plenty to talk about NBA-wise, so we're going to get right down to it. I was proceeding to rip my eyeballs out during the Eastern Conference semifinals, so now we're stuck with the Eastern Conference Finals from hell between the Atlanta Hawks and the Milwaukee Bucks, led by Coach Bud, Mike Budenholzer. I mean, considering that they came within an inch of Kevin Durant's size 17.5 feet, taking them out of the playoffs because Coach Bud literally botched the simplest of tests of just denying Durant the ball and flashing a double team at him, while Durant hit what should have been a game and series clinching 3-pointer against the Bucks, only for it to be ruled a 2-pointer and allowed again to go into OT. The Bucks literally did everything humanly possible to lose that series to the Nets with no Kyrie Irving, a James Harden who couldn't move with a busted hamstring, and a tiring Kevin Durant, and not much else. And the Bucks played them to lose that series and were essentially advanced by default because the Nets just ran out of steam with it just being the KD show down the stretch. It was one of the most pathetic coaching jobs you will ever see in your entire life. But, it is what it is at this point. I can harp on how bad the Eastern Conference has been, but, I'm just going to be blue in the face because nothing, I don't know what else you could say other than how pathetic things have been the last, I would say it's going back through multiple trends at this stage, because you've got Philly getting themselves eliminated by, and I can't believe I'm saying this, an Atlanta Hawks team that they've played hard, no question about it. But if you look at the mismatch pieces on that Hawks team, there's no way ever Philly should be getting bounced by that Hawks team. I as much as I like Doc Rivers, this is a fireable offense just for losing to that Hawks team in the first place in the playoffs. And Ben Simmons, the less said about Simmons, the better, because I've never seen an actual NBA point guard become so afraid of his actual job that in the ending of playoff games, he's getting benched consistently for rookies. Now, in Game 7, Doc didn't bench Ben Simmons, and it made it worse. The Sixers could have won that Game 7 if they had benched Ben Simmons. And the most egregious play is Ben Simmons has a wide open dunk available to him, and he tries to throw it back out because we've done parody videos of this. He is scared of Trae Young at 5'8". He's 5'8", folks. He's not 5'11". He's as much as a 5'11" player as Kyler Murray is. They are stat padding these short dudes. The guy is a dwarf compared to Ben Simmons at 6'11". And the fact that Ben Simmons is claiming that Danilo Gallinari, he of less than half a block per game, was right there, and he's afraid of Gallinari blocking him. I'm sorry. It's just so tiring listening to these clowns. And, it's not good for anyone watching such terrible basketball. I almost in a way have to agree. You never want to say violence is the answer, but I almost have to agree with Shaquille O'Neal, who said point blank, if he was Ben Simmons' teammate, he probably would have thrown hands at him. Well before that series, he called out Embiid for not throwing hands at Ben Simmons because of how bad Simmons has been playing. It's just incomparable that Simmons tanked that entire team and no one held him accountable. And now, after Game 7, you hear Embiid and Doc Rivers throw him onto the bus, and then the Sixers say the next day and have Doc walk back the comments saying that they're very bullish on Ben, with saying that they have a plan for helping Ben with his confidence. I'm sorry, Ben Simmons is not a child. Ben Simmons has been in the league over 5 years now. The popular theory with Ben Simmons is that he is shooting with the wrong hand, and he is too proud to admit that he's been shooting with the wrong hand and being ridiculed in public by actually making the proper shooting hand change. That is the knock on Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons is scared of shooting, and like there's multiple multiple people keep talking about this. It's nothing new. It is nothing new. Everyone keeps saying Ben Simmons is right-handed. He shoots with his left hand, but everyone keeps saying that he's a right-handed shooter, and it just doesn't make any sense. Why he's shooting jump shots with his left hand when he fishes at the rim with his right hand. None of it ever made any sense with Ben Simmons. He can say he's ambidextrous all you want, but like if you're too afraid to shoot jump shots, it's incomparable that you can have an NBA point guard being that afraid of handling the ball. He was so afraid of going to the line that instead of actually running the point, he's setting screens for everyone on the Sixers. He's the point guard. Literally his job is to facilitate the offense and keep it moving. He wasn't even doing that. There's just nothing else. There's nothing else you can say about Ben Simmons other than he quit on his team. But it's worse than quitting, because at least if he quit, the team can work around that. Instead, Ben Simmons is literally tanking his team's chances of winning every second he's out there on the court. There's just nothing else you can say of how aggravating this is. And now we got an Eastern Conference Finals where, the only reason why Atlanta should win a couple of games in the series is because of how incompetent I think Coach Bud is as an NBA head coach. There is no actual matchup with the Hawks that they have a good matchup with the Bucks. Like, this is just a lopsided matchup. The Bucks' size and wingspan should frustrate the hell out of Trae Young. And to be honest, the Hawks, even with Capella, they're going to be spaced out by the Bucks. I don't see how this series stays really competitive. This is a very likely. If this was properly managed, this could very easily be a sweep, and not even a close series. This could just be a flat out sweep, and it would not shock me in the slightest. But it is what it is, but it's just very frustrating, seeing how this is unfolding in terms of the playoffs. Meanwhile, over in the West, and what is going to be the eventual NBA champion, we've got the Clippers without Kawhi Leonard playing the Phoenix Suns, who are without Chris Paul because he's still in COVID protocols for testing positive with COVID-19. Even with this going on, I actually think, not having Kawhi around has forced the Clippers to actually focus on executing half-court basketball, which was my knock on them the entire way through, that they refuse to actually run half-court offense. Now that they don't have Kawhi, they have to run half-court offense because pushing pace isn't necessarily in their best interest because, they just don't have enough horses to actually get it done. The thing about this series that actually caught me off guard in game one was the fact that you had Boogie Cousins emerge from the bench, which we haven't seen Boogie Cousins at all since the Mavericks series. So it is interesting to see Boogie Cousins being back in the lineup. Now, in terms of the actual series itself, I still think Phoenix is in the driver's seat here. Phoenix is the better half-court team. Devin Booker is playing at an extremely high level, far more consistent than Paul George, better scorer than Paul George. Obviously, everyone keeps talking about Paul George's defense, but Paul George is not guarding Devin Booker. He cannot cover Devin Booker, in my opinion. They can try to have Paul George cover Devin Booker, but I think that speed alone is just gonna make that not advantageous matchup for George. So, what do the Clippers basically have to do? They have to get to the free throw line. They got to try to get DeAndre Ayton out of the game with foul trouble. And I think playing more minutes for Boogie Cousins, Zubac is not the kind of body that's really going to give Ayton trouble. Boogie could give Ayton trouble staying out of foul trouble. And they just got to try to attack the paint with their guards. That's the biggest thing the Clippers can do. Now, from a DFS perspective, the question becomes, how do we make the math work in terms of some of these salaries? Because Cousins is we didn't see Cousins starting just because he hadn't been playing at all in the playoffs outside of one or two games in the Mavericks series. He was completely MIA against Utah, and now he's back in. So on DraftKings, Cousins is going to go for 2,000. It makes more sense to have Cousins in the lineup as the filler spot in the utility spot. In the captain spot, I think it really comes down to, if you think the Clippers are going to win, then you have to foresee that it's got to be a collective effort. I don't think it's Paul George is going to be dropping 40-plus points on the Suns. I don't see that being a likely scenario. Kawhi could do it. Paul George, no, not so much. So, to me, the way you got to kind of think about your roster construction, for a Phoenix side that just spreads the ball around, the captain spot has to go to Booker. And then from there, you can kind of start filling in the pieces elsewhere. So if it's going to be Booker in the captain spot, the way I see the pathway of making the math work kind of comes down to, you play Booker, you play DeMarcus Cousins at 2,000, you got Rondo in at 2,600, and I fill in some of these other pieces with Clippers or Suns players, but you got Cameron Payne at 6,200, and you got Cameron Johnson at 5,400. As the most likely options that I would be putting in for Phoenix. I wouldn't necessarily put Ayton in at 9,200 because, to me, I don't think Ayton plays enough minutes to get to what is a projection of about 35 fantasy points. To me, that seems a little bit high. I know he was around that point for game one, but I do think the Clippers are going to make a more concerted effort of trying to get Ayton into foul trouble. So it's just, it's one of those things where, I think it makes more sense to kind of concentrate on Clippers players. But to me, the plays that I would be looking at for the Clippers would be Cousins in the utility spot, Rondo at 2,600. So Rondo and Cousins, to me, will be staples in my lineup tonight. And then you got a Terrence Mann at 6,400. Now, the issue is, you got Paul George at 12,000. Paul George had a good game one. I'm not gonna say he didn't have a good game one because he shot 10 of 26. He got through the free throw line, and he did put up 55 fantasy points. He did. He's put up in the last three playoff games, fantasy points wise, he's put up 55 against the Suns. In Game 7 against Utah, he put up 54. And in Game 6 against Utah, which was his best playoff performance since his days in Indiana, he had 71 fantasy points. So I totally get people being on the Paul George bandwagon. But we know Paul George, and we know the clunker game is coming. I don't know if it's Game 2, but I do know that the Suns should be favored in this matchup. I would not put it past it if the Suns get up early on this game and really start putting the pressure on the Clippers, that maybe the Clippers pack it in and you get more of a blowout risk. I'm just saying, to me, this game feels more along the lines of Suns blowout more than anything else. And then if the Clippers somehow win, it's going to be a low-scoring game regardless, because they were able to kind of slow down the Suns offensively, kind of make it more on Devin Booker to try to carry the load throughout, and cause the Suns just to be even more low scoring than normal. Normally the Suns hold everyone under 100 points anyway. So again, I think, the over-under's at 223. I kind of see the under coming here in this matchup. So to me, paying, like, Paul George is the most expensive player on the slate at $12K. Devin Booker's at 11.8. I think there's more upside with Booker because the ball is always going to be in his hands, as opposed to Paul George, who's going to isolate on certain plays, but predominantly the ball's not going to be in his hands. I would rather have the primary ball handlers on the Clippers. Reggie Jackson seems a little bit too high priced at $8,600, but you can sprinkles him in some lineups. But that's why I really like having Terrence Mann and Rondo, because Rondo and Mann are going to get playing time. Patrick Beverley is kind of out of the rotation at this point, but he'll get some minutes as well. But I do think that Rondo and Mann are more likely to get the minutes over P-Bev. I think Patrick Beverley is more of a situational type guy. I think he's the fourth guard coming in because Mann has just supplanted him. And then in this series, the Clippers know that they need Rondo's decision-making at the point to really manage the half-court defense that they're going to be facing. So to me, I'm almost okay with fading Paul George to get more Clippers guys in there and balance it out if you're having Booker and the captain. Meanwhile, if you're using the idea that the Clippers are going to win this game 2, then I like having one of the Clippers guards, whether it be Rondo or Mann, in as a cheap captain play. That way you can fit in Paul George and Booker. But, I just don't necessarily see Paul George hitting that value that we've seen. Like, I just don't see that projection being in the 50s. I know he's going to be playing the minutes, but, Paul George has been shooting the rock pretty well lately. But we know Paul George gets cold with his jumper. It's very hot and cold at times. That's why the nickname of Way Off P started happening lately in place of Playoff P, because it's just the inconsistency with Paul George. It's there. It is there. So, we can't act like we're going to be shocked if Paul George comes up with a very, very pedestrian stat line tonight. So, to me, I think the way you play this is you play cheap Clippers and the captain as your alternative to Devin Booker. But Devin Booker, to me, is the overall play at captain. And then, Boogie Cousins, he's gonna get the run. Now the matchup makes more sense. I really wish I had thought about Boogie Cousins before game 1, but he had fallen so much out of the rotation that it really was a surprise to see him in there. And again, Boogie Cousins is likely to only be playing 10 to 12 minutes because Boogie, conditioning wise, is not there really to keep up with NBA basketball. He's only he hasn't even had a full season since multiple injuries has derailed his career over the last 4 years. But I do think Boogie Cousins is going to play a factor in this series now, just because it makes sense that the Clippers are going to be looking to attack DeAndre Ayton in the paint and try to open up space for those guards to penetrate. So to me, that's the way it goes. I know folks are going to be asking about the Phoenix bench. Not benchers, but starters like Jay Crowder, Mikal Bridges, Cameron Payne. I'm fine with Cameron Payne. I'm fine with Cameron Johnson. Crowder and Bridges, I can take it or leave it with them because you're going to get a kind of low floor, but definitely a extremely low ceiling. And the thing is, with their prices keep inching up, a guy like Nicholas Batum has far more upside in my opinion, than either Bridges or Crowder. Batum can get hot from behind the arc. Batum is priced in between both Bridges and Crowder. Crowder 7,200, Bridges is 7,800, and Batum is 7,600. To me, Batum has higher upside than both players, and also I don't understand the Mikal Bridges pricing because to me he's the exact same projection range as Jay Crowder. They're both going to be around 27, 28 fantasy points. That's just what they do. They're not blowing past 30. They're just not. It's they're consistently in that 25 to 30 range, and that's what they stay in their lane. They don't have pop-off games, whereas you can see some of these Clippers getting some run, especially if it's a blowout situation where they're down double digits and they give Paul George the rest, and then you can have Rondo or Mann or Beverly running with the backup unit, and then Batum gets more of the lead role of trying to score the rock in that kind of blowout scenario. So I do like Batum, and that's the reason why I'm okay with the potentially fading Paul George narrative, because I do think the Suns win this matchup to go up 2-0. And there are other assets on the Clippers that, to me, have more potential to surge past in terms of fantasy output than what's initially being projected. So that's my take on the game. For NBA tonight, obviously, we'll have the Eastern Conference Finals starting up on Wednesday night, and we'll kind of go from there. We also have hockey tonight. I already got the Habs fans chirping at me about how they're playing so much better against Vegas. Listen, I'm just going to say this point blank. Vegas took their foot off the gas pedal after beating the Avalanche, and they're trying to find themselves again because they gave away Game 3 on that Marc-Andre Fleury puck mishandle to give another win to the Habs. So they got 2 wins. The bets I had already done and dusted. Yes, the Habs won 2 games. And they should have lost both of those games, to be perfectly honest. So the series should have been over, in my opinion. But, it is what it is. The Habs have made it a 2 out of 3 series, but there's no way you can tell me that the Habs are a better team. If we're looking at this objectively, the Golden Knights are a much better team than the Montreal Canadiens. It's just that the Golden Knights have shot themselves in the foot repeatedly in this series. If they clean it up, I think you'll see a very similar thumping to what Tampa Bay was actually able to do to the Islanders last night, putting up 7 or 8 goals. I lost track at the very end of the final score, but Tampa blitzed the Isles last night to move within a game of the NHL Finals, and I think we're going to see a very similar result with Vegas. I think Vegas pours it on Montreal to push them to the brink of elimination. I just look at this as going to be a Tampa Vegas final. I just do not see the Habs winning this game tonight. I would be absolutely stunned if the Habs actually won this game. So, that's all I got. But we'll wrap up the show there, and we'll see how the games pan out. But that's all for now. And the less we hear from anyone saying trust the process, the better, because I am so glad to retire that phrase. Good riddance. So have a good slate, everyone. Enjoy the games, and we'll see how the winners shake out. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Throwdown Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and all other major outlets.